All right, welcome back to World Studies Online Academy. So sit back, relax, strap on your seatbelt, because you ain't never been on a ride like this before. Hit it! All right, so previously we've talked a little bit about the geography of India and a couple of things that comes along with that. We've talked about the people of India, a little bit about their culture, and some of the food that they eat. We cooked some yesterday. It was delicious. I hope you gave it a shot, or you will in the future. Indian food is super tasty. Give it a shot. What I want to do now is go back to something we talked about at the end of yesterday's discussion, and that was this. The British. We have to go way back to 1492. And as we all know, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, but most of us don't really know why he sailed the ocean blue. Some people like to talk about in their elementary classes that Columbus was trying to prove that the world was round when everyone else thought it was flat. That's nonsense. It's incredibly stupid. Everybody knows that the world has been a sphere since biblical times, man. It's always been known. Anyone who goes to the top of a large hill can see the curvature of the earth. No, Christopher Columbus was searching for a shorter route to the Indies, also known as India. Now, he didn't get there. He set sail across that Atlantic Ocean, and as we all know, he landed in modern-day Cuba. He thought he had arrived in India. Hence why we call Native Americans Indians. We should stop doing that. It doesn't really make any sense. They're not Indians, they're Native Americans. They belong to different tribes that have been here since about 13,000 BCE. But why was Christopher Columbus doing this? Why risk the lives of himself and everyone else on board all of those ships? Here's why. It is notoriously difficult to get to India. As we learned previously, to the north of India, we have the Himalayas, the tallest, largest mountain range in the world. Very hard to pass over those Himalayas, especially before airplanes. Now over here to the west, we have a whole nother problem. We have the Thar Desert. That's that right there. It forms a natural barrier between modern-day India and Pakistan. That has been constantly fought over between Pakistan and India because it's strategically important. It's a large desert that armies really have a hard time passing through. So whoever controls that desert has a strategic advantage over the other country. And that's why thousands of people have died fighting over this sandy patch of nothing for hundreds of years. Now, just north of that Thar Desert, again, that almost impassable desert, is another mountain range called the Hindu Kush. And the Hindu Kush can be considered an extension of those Himalayas. It's also very hard to pass through or over, except in one place. That's a place called the Khyber Pass. Here it is. Now, this may not look like much, but this was the only feasible passage from Europe into India for hundreds of years. So this Khyber Pass was hugely important for developing trade and relationships between the rest of the world and India. In fact, in the early 1800s, there was a company developed called the East India Trading Company, these guys, whose sole goal was to develop a trade relationship between the British Empire and India. Now, this was an age of empires. This was the time period where it was just about right after the United States of America had rebelled against the British Empire and had formed their own nation. The British Empire did not have a great reputation with people at this time. That's because they were very exploitative, they were very cruel, they were very greedy, and India, unfortunately, similar case. In about the 1850s, the East India Trading Company, working on behalf of the British Empire, arrived in India. And this established what we call the Raj, R-A-J. Now, the Raj was a time period where the East India Trading Company essentially conquered India. From about the 1850s to the 1950s, that's about 100 years, the British Empire, via the East India Trading Company, ruled India with an iron fist. They exploited the people, they exploited the land, and they took really whatever they wanted. And they made a fortune doing so. And it wasn't until about the 1950s when India had a series of rebellions led by a guy named Mahatma Gandhi, led a peaceful protest rebellion to try to get India independence from Great Britain. Unlike the United States of America, they didn't do this with guns. They didn't do this with a war. They didn't have a George Washington. They had a Gandhi. And so they led this revolution through nonviolent means. And then in the late 1950s, India achieved its independence, became its own country. And that's the India we know today. And they're still feeling the effects of it. India has a growing and robust economy, but they're still recovering from 100 years of exploitation, 100 years of having their lands taken from them, 100 years of a lot of the money growing on India's soil going out to other places in the world, primarily that British Empire. So again, to review, I mean, we could take an entire year and just learn about India's geography and how it impacts its history, but we can't do that. We only have like 4 days. So in brief, India's geography has determined its history to a large degree. Those Himalayas up north protected it from invasion from China and other places, but it also limited trade. That Thar Desert and the Hindu Kush Mountains over there to the west, again protected it from invasion, but also kind of secluded India. They influenced history so much that the voyage that was designed to find a shorter distance between Spain and India ended up introducing Europeans to this place called the United States of America. That's a pretty big deal. So these connections we see between who we are and how we live and how people in India are and how they live, they're so closely connected. But ultimately, guys, it's about understanding this human story and this human existence that we live in and how we might think about someone on the other side of the planet as being different and separate and foreign to us, but really this human story is so linked together in ways that we fail to notice on a regular basis. It's important moving forward in a global society that the actions we take, the attitudes we develop, the ways we communicate with one another, the ways that we see other human beings are more important now than ever. And we can learn all that through learning a little bit about India's geography. Starting with monsoons, Himalayas, and agriculture, and eventually getting all the way toward this big story about how India became the largest democracy on planet Earth. I told you geography was fun, didn't I? Let's get ready for our test tomorrow. I will give you instructions on PowerSchool. Please let me know what questions and comments you have. I would love to have a discussion about this. We can get on to email, Padlet, we can do discussion boards, whatever you need, I'm here for you. So until then, I'll see you. Keep your brains moving.